RA was trained in acupuncture, homeopathy, and anthroposophical medicine, and operates a holistic private veterinary practice in Sandefjord, Norway. He's been active in this tech since the beginning. When I spoke ahead of time with RA in preparation for today, I mentioned to him Andrew Linnell's request that I try to bring some humor in, and so knowing that RA was Norwegian, I thought maybe, well, there's Norway, Finland, Sweden. I thought maybe he was familiar in some way with the American Swedish humorist Garrison Keillor, and I relayed to him the Garrison Keillor joke. Did you hear about the Swedish farmer who loved his wife so much he almost told her? And R.A. said, "Oh, no, 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 no." He said, "That's Swedish. That's Swedish humor. So the Swedes are conformist. They're controlling. They have power. So the Norwegians are more anarchical and violating of rules." So I wondered what might be Norwegian humor, and so I'm hoping we'll get some better view of that. Um, and I wondered particularly, and I want to ask this as a preparatory question for RA. As I know from other talks by RA that as a veterinarian, one of the discoveries he made was that sometimes to treat an animal, you really have to treat the owner, and then the animal gets better. So I'm wondering if there's something out of maybe some humorous stories of just exactly how would you approach the owner of a cow who has approached you and said, "My cow is sick. Please, can you come and help?" And how do you say to him or her, "Yes, your cow is sick. I want you to take this"? Any thoughts, Ari?
Yeah. Do I start? I can answer that question, yes.
I'll ask that question because I just learned of course, Ari will be talking about the four portals to the spiritual world, the new one being the portal of light. But yes, if you can just start by, because that's one of my questions is, how did you do that? How did you tell the owner of the cow that you're going to have to treat him to treat the cow?
I am on the picture and everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, because I see only you, but that's okay. Well, in the beginning, of course, when I started to be a veterinarian or my veterinary practice, they doubted. And they even said to me 10 years later that we actually consider not to pay you at all. But they saw that it worked. And during for 40 years or something, or whatever, 45 years, in Norway, they know that it works. So they accept almost everything I say or do in that way. So there is no, in the beginning, I just went on and they saw it worked, and then I didn't have to prove myself anymore.
Okay, thank you.
And at a certain, I had 10% of all the horses in Norway as patients. So I had a huge practice. Well, why I started to realize and see that that the diseases in animals came from the owners was the method that I'm going to describe, because that is important to what I'm going to bring during these 45 minutes. And that is a method described by Rudolf Steiner the 3rd of April 1912 in Helsinki, called fading, where he described how you can fade. I'm sorry. Where he described how you can fade into nature or whatever, actually, and then you come into the, you might say, another world. Let's say it very short, the spiritual world. And by doing this with the animals, I saw that the disease, the pathological beings causing the disease in the animals came from the owner. And that's why I started to treat the owners, and that works maybe 4 or 5 times better than treating the animals directly. So I started to treat only the human beings. And then I also realized that these elemental beings that cause the pathology in animals, they translocated when you treated them. They went from the animal to another animal. So the owner thought it was cured, but yes, it was, but another animal got the elemental being and developed disease. That happens between human beings also, of course. So then I had to develop methods that transform the elemental beings, which is only possible through Christ. So today I only use sort of Christianized medicine to transform the disease and not translocate it. And this method of fading into, that means with your consciousness, you go out of your body, you go out of the physical world and into something else. That then you will see that the first world you get to or into is called the elemental world, consisting of totally 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 different relations, totally different laws than the physical. And when you fade further, you can get into the etheric world, where other laws rule, and where other beings live, and where other relations exist. And then you go further. You might say also it's like going from imagination to inspiration, intuition, and actually further. So then you fade further and you come into the astral world, and then at last the devachanic world. So this fading into especially the elemental world is very useful in treating in medicine and also in understanding nature. So to prepare for this lecture, I follow the light through these different worlds. And very much in these lectures that I listened to before I fell asleep, because I am out of sync with American time, then most were concerning how light behave, not all, but quite much in the material world. You have a certain thing that, for example, the complementary color, that is an effect from partly the elemental world and partly the etheric world. So this, and that I've seen for many years, this discussion between the color theory of Newtonian theory and Goetheanistic theory. They are both, in a way, right, although the Newtonian is describing the material world phenomena, and the Goetheanistic, partly the elemental world, partly the etheric world. So when you leave the physical, the material world and get into the elemental world, the colors get sort of mirror-wise. It's not the same colors. It is like seeing the colors in a mirror, but the colors themselves get mirrored. So right becomes left, left becomes right, up becomes down, down becomes up. It's very difficult to describe this in relation to light and colors, but there is a definite change in that, and the effect is also different, because in the elemental world you have the adversarial forces. You have the Ahrimanic, the Luciferic, and the Asuric forces. And it was so interesting to see this picture 2 lectures ago with Lucifer and Ahriman. And he said that was a picture of Christ, because when you observe Lucifer in the elemental world, he is this redness, this warmth, this redness, and Ahriman, or the Ahrimanic elemental beings, is bluish, cold. But you have a third adversarial force, the Asuric beings, and they tend to be in the middle of Lucifer and Ahriman, where they touch, and they look like structured light. You might say Lucifer is this red, flowing light, Ahriman is blue, cold light, but the Asuric beings is a structured light. And it was so nice to see in this picture that between Lucifer and Ahriman you had this structured green, which is very clear the Asuric beings. So it's not actually Christ anymore. It was on the time of Rudolf Steiner, Christ between Lucifer and Ahriman, because at that time the Asuric beings had not been let loose, sort of, yet. But today it is Christ between Lucifer, Ahriman, and Asuras. So, in the elemental world, this is the mirror-wise, and when you see elemental beings, they always look like they are seen in a mirror. Down, up, down, left, right, right, left. If you then fade further through the elemental world, you come, of course, to a gate, and Rudolf Steiner describe this entrance to the etheric world, where you today can find Christ, as gates. And at Steiner's time, there were 2 gates in activity. And the third gate, the gate of the elements, were at that time partly locked. And Johanna von Kaiserlink, she had the ability to fade to a certain extent into the elemental world. And she asked Rudolf Steiner that, can I go through the elemental world to the etheric world? And he said, it is possible, but not safe today. it will be in the future, and the future is today. So, and I will come back to these gates because there is a fourth gate also today that started to open from Christ in the etheric, which is related to very much to light. And these four gates, they can also be linked to the elemental world, the gates of the elements. The first gate, the gate of the sun, to the etheric. The third gate, the gate of death, can be linked to the material or also certain the astral. But the fourth gate is related to the spiritual light. And another interesting thing with this four gate, which we will discuss further later, is because Steiner said we have to go through all gates to really become initiated in the spiritual world. And the first gate is very much like the Solomonic Jesus. And the fourth gate is very much like the Natanic Jesus. So these two gates are both needed to make us understand the spiritual, just like both the Solomonic line and the Natanic line were needed to bring Christ into this world. I have a little problem to speak today because if 3 days ago I fell down from the roof and broke a few ribs. So that's why I sit a little stiff and have to clear the throat. When you then go further, in the etheric, and then you come through these gates to the etheric world. And in the etheric world, the light and colors are as described in the Goethean color theory. So then they sort of change and they have a certain healing property. The colors in the elemental world have no healing property. But in the elemental world, you understand suddenly why elemental particles have what is called entanglement, which is very difficult to understand from the view of the physical world. That means that photons are connected no matter how far it is between them. One thing that happened to the one also happens to the other, entanglement. This is normal, that is a law in the elemental world. This is not a law in the etheric world. You see, that is so important. There are different relations, different laws in the different worlds. And as human beings consist of all these worlds, we have a material body, we have an elemental body, we have an etheric body, an astral body, and of course our I consciousness, with which we can travel through these worlds. So we can come then to from the etheric world, where also time is different from the elemental world. We can come further into the world of the devaconic relationships, where time is further different from both the elemental world and the etheric world. And the light in the etheric world, the light in the etheric world has a different, looks different and have a different effect from the light in the material world and the light in the elemental world. I hope I don't mix the words now. I try to hold my tongue straight in my mouth, as we say in Norway. So when we are discussing light and the effects of light, we have in a way to define in what world we are when we describe and define it. I had there was a man came to visit me yesterday, Hans Kolstad. He is a Norwegian philosopher, written more than 100 books, and he had been studying Bergson and was of that opinion that Bergson had seemed to have solved how, in theory at least, how to derive etheric energy instead of uh, gas or coal and so on. And that is to go through the line, the threshold between the elemental world and the etheric world. At that threshold, you could derive or tap etheric energy. For me, this was quite new. I have never read Bergson. I heard about him, but I never read him. But this information coincide with also my view that to tap into the etheric energy, we have to go to the etheric world, especially the borderlines. If we are going to do something in the elemental world, we have to go to the threshold of this world, or a threshold within the elemental world. I have written quite much about that, the three occultism that Steiner say we must master within a certain time frame. The hygienic occultism, the occultism of mechanical occultism, and eugenic occultism. These can be mastered from the elemental world, but we have to go there. So I will leave it with that, this travel through the different worlds, and try to say a little more about the light, especially between the elemental world and the etheric world. And this light comes into being or is seen mostly in relation to the four doors. As I said, at Steiner's time, there were 2 active doors. Then it became 3, and today there are, in my opinion, 4 doors open and active. The door of the sun, the door of the elements, the door of death, and then the new one created by the Natanic Jesus from the etheric world, the door of light. The door of the sun, you might say that the door of the sun should be a very strong light. But when you observe it, it is more like the light of a spiritual sun. That means it is not penetrating light, overwhelming light. It is sort of the dark sun, the light of the spiritual sun. And this has a very etheric effect. That means it can heal. That can heal wounds, it can heal trauma, and so on. I am currently doing some investigation about how to use this light in therapy, as my whole life is actually therapy. And I have had some patient, a carpenter who had a pain in the shoulder and different things. And I haven't tried it with my ribs. I maybe should do that. I suffer in silence. And it seemed to have a quite light healing effect on these wounds. Then we have the door of the elements, which is more like a colored light. The colors are, you can actually see the colors lingering in this doorway. And the guardians of this doorway is Vidar, as I have written 2 or 3 books about, and Balder. Vidar and Balder in red and blue. Quite much like what Steiner described as the altar in the spiritual world with Christian Rosenkreuz and himself, red and blue. This light has no healing effect, but it gives an development of clairvoyance, or rather what Steiner described as the new clairvoyance, which I for a long, long time did not understand what is a clairvoyance and what is a new clairvoyance. And then Vidar taught that the new clairvoyance is actually not clairvoyance, it is clairaudience. So I immediately called my learned friend in Finland, Marco Maula, who knows everything. He's like a living Prokofiev. And he said, yes, Valentin Thomberg have actually several pages where he explained how the new clairvoyance must be clairaudience. So this has more to do with the development of the new clairvoyance. And it is new because it is inaccessible by the adversarial forces, by Lucifer, Ahriman, and Asuras. And Valentin Thomberg have a long explanation why it is inaccessible to these forces. So I will not go into that here, but it has to do with the 12 senses connected to the 12 zodiacal constellations. And some of the constellations are accessible to Lucifer, Ahriman, or Asuras, and some are not. And if you then combine sight and hearing, it becomes inaccessible. So that this school that Ahriman intend to start when he incarnate, the school of clairvoyance, will not give the students a false clairvoyance, but a true clairvoyance, which is a clairvoyance audience. That was very short about that. And this light in this gate, the light or the colors is colored. So in the sun, it is more like dark light. In the gate of the elements, it is colored light. Then we come to the gate of the death, where there are 3 guardians in the and the light in this door or gate is gray, shades of gray. I do not have very much to say about that gate because it has always, well, I haven't had time to investigate it actually. And I have preferred to do other things, especially the fourth gate. Because when I came to the fourth gate, these three first gates are connected to our thinking, feeling, and willing. And as a very important part of Vidar's teaching is that today we are developing a fourth soul capability, which he called time karma Christ. So thinking, feeling, willing, and time karma Christ. There is no name on this ability yet. So I was urged to go this path to this fourth gate by activating this time karma Christ, my rudimentary soul ability of time karma Christ. And then I ended up in the fourth gate. And in the fourth gate, there are 4 guardians. And it is bathed in light. And 2 of the most important guardians in the fourth gate is Adam, Kadmon, and the Natanic Jesus soul, which is actually quite connected to Adam. And this is bathed in light. And the effect of this light is that you can see. It sort of turns around in your head and become a beacon or a torch, very strong torch, so you can see into this spiritual world that is behind the fourth gate. Rudolf Steiner said that to be a true initiate, you have to go through all 3 gates. He said at that time, and now 4 gates, because they have so different effect. It's almost like if you are going to know a country, you have to drive several paths through the country, or even take a boat along the coast, at least Norway. So the same, you cannot only take one road, one path, and say that you know Norway. You have to do the mountains, you have to do the lowlands, you have to do the fjords and the sea and the forest. And I think that in the future there will be 7 gates, but for the time being 4. So the effect of the light of these 4 gates and what they give to our spiritual development and our clairvoyant abilities is very different. And I think it would be interesting to discuss light more in that situation, that connection, not only how light works in the material or a little in the etheric world. How many minutes do I have left?
You have actually, well, probably 19 minutes. If you want to leave 5 minutes for questions, you have 19 minutes left for presenting.
Okay. I wanted to, because as I started with, it is extremely important for us today to walk into the spiritual world, to see these things and to observe the changes that happens in the spiritual world, because there are great changes. And without observing and getting to know these changes, we will be unable to understand what is happening today or in the world for that matter. And one of the most important changes is the freeing of the Asuric beings. Rudolf Steiner said that in 1879, Michael threw the spirits of darkness down on earth. And that means into the human realm. And the spiritual world was cleansed by them. But we had to deal with them here, of course. But they were not the only dark spirits that was thrown down, because you had in 70 years later, or during the next 70 years, the Ahrimanic elemental beings or spirits of darkness were also thrown down. And then another 70 years where the Asuric beings were thrown down. So this is described in the Edda, the Scandinavian, the North Germanic mythology, by the death Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, the death of the old gods. And the most important is you had there three very important adversarial forces. It was the Midgard snake, the Fenris wolf, and Hel. The old gods, Odin, tried to fight the Midgard snake, but he was killed by it. Thor tried to kill the Fenris wolf, but he was also killed. And he was revenged by Vidar, who was the only god that survived Ragnarok. And Vidar is, according to Rudolf Steiner, then from 1879 or that time, become like an archangel. For the bringing of Christ into this world. So then it comes the interesting thing, the third force, the third adversarial, Hel. Who was she? That was a woman fought by. She was not fought by an archangel or angel. She was fought by a being called Surt. And he was, or is, in an elemental being. So these Asuric forces, which has, according to Steiner, to do with life and death, the Vikings called that Hel. That is life or death, mainly death. She could only be fought by forces from the elemental world. And that is what I also have experienced. You can, and when you then know the forces of the elemental world and the occultisms of the elemental world, then you are able to transform Asuric beings. You have to bring Christ into the elemental world. And Surt's weapon is a two-edged flaming sword that is bringing Christ into the elemental world. So you can then redeem the Asuric beings by using powers from the elemental world. So all three adversarial forces can in the end be redeemed. The Luciferic, the Ahrimanic, first the Luciferic, then the Ahrimanic, and then the Asuric. And also the light is an important part of conquering the Asuric beings, because this flaming sword, you see, the Mikael is fighting with a sword or lance. It is not described as flaming. It might be bright, or it might be, but not like glowing iron. Vidar is fighting the Fenris wolf, also with the sword, and he puts a sword in the mouth or in the upper throat, in the pharynx of the Fenris wolf. So what we called 100 years ago for dragon fight is today a wolf fight, and will become a hell fight. And this flaming sword, to me, that is very obvious. That is Christ, the light of Christ. Which can be brought then into the elemental world, where the Asuric elemental beings are released. And that is part of the fourth gate, this gate that still is in the elemental world, or on the border between the elemental world and the etheric world, where this very, very Christ light is to be detected. All of these four doors lead into the etheric world, where Christ can be found. But the fourth door is sort of opened by Christ himself, or the Nathanic part of Christ, which is not the case with the other three doors. But this fading, to see these changes, the change from 2 to 3 to 4 doors, the power of Vidar as a now very important archangel, the elevation of Michael to be an archai and not any longer an archangel, and this loosening, this impulse of the Asuric beings, all these are things that we have to deal with today, and which was not present, at least present in our day 100 years ago. So this fading, I have tried to say in many, I have even written a book called Fading and Merging, based on the method of Steiner that he gave the 3rd of April 1912 in Helsinki. So we can ourselves venture into this spiritual world. That means we have to go out of ourselves with our consciousness, out of our body, and then move into the spiritual world. I have also many times tried to describe the difference between this fading or this moving or this walking and meditation, because it might be characterized as a meditation, but it is not in a meditation. I cannot, maybe some do, but usually you don't travel in a meditation, you don't move. And you have actually to move. You have to go from one place to another. You go from the physical world. That is not spatial, of course. It is in depth. You go from the physical and then you go deeper. Then you come to the elemental world. Then you go deeper. And from the elemental world, it was also mentioned in other lectures, you can see a certain past and future. Then you go deeper. Then you come to the etheric world. You can see further into the past and the future. Then you come to the astral. Then you come to the devacanic world, where you can see actually before Saturn and after Vulcan. So this venturing into the spiritual is today, in my opinion, the most important thing we can do. And Steiner have exactly described the method, but not so many have used this method to go into the spiritual world, or not done it long enough, or concentrated enough. Some have, and I know several who have come quite far, but most do not. I think I will stop the lecture there and go to questions.
Thank you, Ari. Tom, do we have any questions lined up?
Sure. Ari, what were the four names of the guardians of the fourth gate?
I didn't say. I should see something. View. Is it weaker? No. Well, the four guardians, and that was quite interesting. You see, the first guardian you see at the fourth gate is Adam Kadmon. The second you can see is Vidar. The third you see is Odin, the old high archangel, and the fourth is the Nathan Jesus, and they are standing behind each other. The Nathan Jesus child is sort of sitting halfway lying in the front. Then behind come Adam Kadmon, then come Vidar, and further behind Odin.
There's another question. Thank you. Do the four gates correlate to specific organs of perception or chakras?
Chakra I am not so very interested in, but these four gates relate to the four soul abilities: thinking, feeling, willing, and time karma Christ. So totally there are 9 guardians, and I haven't actually talked about that, because when you can sort of have been observing all 4 gates, something happens. And later it has appeared to me that Steiner describes something of the same in the 19 lessons. When at a certain point the different hierarchies or angelic beings, they start to talk together as a choir. So when you have an overview of the 4 gates, all the 9 guardians start to teach as a collegium. What is that in English? Together.
That's right.
Yeah, they start to teach as a collegium. And that teaching is very different from the teaching of the single guardians. And the last months I have been enjoying this collegium teaching, and that is extremely interesting.
Thank
So
you.
I have just now written a book called the first title was The Fourth Gate, because I thought this is very important to tell. But when I realized that the fourth gate, when you had come to the fourth, they will be a collegium. All the 4 gates will sound in synchronicity. Then I changed the title from The Fourth Gate to The 4 Gates. Yeah.
Is there a reason for calling this technique fading? Because to this person, it sounds somewhat the opposite of being wakeful and concentrated.
No, you have to be totally wakeful and concentrated, yes. Maybe fading is the wrong word. I have found no good word for it.
And then using the term gate, to me appears a little bit like a materialistic term. Is there a way to characterize the inner experience as one approaches what is, I don't know if it's a threshold or a change of inner sight or imagination?
Yeah.
Well, can you say more about that inner experience?
Yeah, Rudolf Steiner described it as a door or gate. That's why I use those words. But when you reach it, it is very much like a portal. It is like a door. It is very much like standing in front of a door. So the name gate or door is cause materialistic, but it covers what you experience.
One more question. Are there any resources or support groups to connect with others in learning how to fade and merge?
Yes, there is Anthroposophic Society in Chicago. I was in Chicago and I was lecturing there, and we have had 10 online 1.5-hour sessions with this, and they are coming one step further almost every time. So you can contact the Chicago Anthroposophic branch, and they will, and then you can join this group. It's about 50, 60, 70 participants every time.
Another
I
question.
see a question from Nick Peak. Go ahead, Nick.
Thank you. Alva, you mentioned that you feel that there will be 3 more gates for a total of 7.
Yes.
Do you have any idea of the length of time during which the 3 more will become apparent?
Oh yeah, that is a long time. That is the end of the world.
So maybe 1 more between now and our next incarnation, or maybe not.
It has to do with the development of our soul capacities, our soul, like thinking, feeling, willing. And we will have more. We will not stand only in those 3.
Yeah, okay. Mange takk.
Oh, vær så god.
Ari, another question from the audience. Do these guardians or gates correspond in any way to the 9 Beatitudes?
Hmm. Very interesting question. You see, I am one person and I have been working with this for only 24 years. So I have not had time to think about all eventualities, but that is a very interesting question. And 9 is quite interesting. The total number in our time of guardians are 9. And suddenly, that I had never thought about either. In the Lord of the Rings, there were 9. I mean, the group of 9 bringing the ring to destroy the ring. Fellowship on the 9, yeah.
All right. When we spoke earlier, I was again trying to get you to say something about cosmic humor, which Steiner, of course, put at the top of the representative man. And I asked you if there was any particular importance for any one of the gates, and you said all of them. And you said because none of the adversaries have humor.
Yeah.
You
Humor
say anything?
is the best way to sort of take the weapons away from the adversarials. So humor is a godly gift. Yeah, well, I cannot say so much more. It is when you can see something humorous in an attack, then they have no power.